That girl Junna Tenkoin, he described as a total airhead. During gym class, Yuki remembered that a guy friend of hers had rested his head on her lap. Without hesitation, Junna casually offered him a lap pillow as well. When he reacted with surprise, she simply lent him her lap, as if it were nothing. Yuki found himself resting his head on Junna's lap, his face flushed with shock and embarrassment. To make it even more overwhelming, she patted his head. Yuki told himself he was still a man who could maintain his rationality amidst it all. He thought to himself that this was fun and a truly refreshing view. Junna Tenkoin thought that if it weren't for Yuki Sanada, this moment probably wouldn't be so enjoyable. Junna Tenkoin quietly thanked him, smiling with her eyes closed, and promised herself that she would write this feeling in her diary that night. Yuki Sanada, turning red, warned her that if she said things so bluntly, it was dangerous. Junna Tenkoin's face took on a confused and innocent look as she asked what was dangerous about that. Yuki Sanada had a troubled and flustered face as he thought there was no way he could explain it. He struggled again to find the words. Later, standing outside with others, he reminded himself that they were just friends. He remembered then the day he met Junna-san, he had sworn. After finishing his work, Yuki Sanada said this was about it for the day. Just then, Yuki's mother called him for dinner, and Yuki Sanada replied, "Okay." At the table, Yuki Sanada thanked his mother, and Yuki's mother said she would cook dinner tomorrow. Yuki Sanada said thank you for the meal. Yuki Sanada narrated that his father had passed away from an illness when he was little. With a cheerful smile, Yuki's mother told Yuki Sanada to keep his schedule open for the upcoming long holiday because they were going to a piano concert. Yuki Sanada asked if it was a classical concert. Yuki's mother replied that it was and showed him the details on her phone. On the phone, Yuki Sanada saw a memorial concert poster for Kanade Midorikawa and began to realize that this was a name he found nostalgic. He recalled that he had often listened to Kanade Midorikawa's CDs during his piano lessons. Yuki's mother, with a serious yet gentle look, told him that, as the son of a small bicycle shop, he needed to listen to her and study properly for now. She promised to raise him to be a respectable man who could stand out anywhere in the future. Eventually, she said, he could do whatever he wanted, but for the time being, he needed to follow her guidance. Thus, with that educational policy in place, Yuki Sanada was given a sort of gifted education. This included lessons on manners and studies. Yuki Sanada read about a talented woman on his phone and told himself that, though her talent was world-renowned, she was also known to be a beauty with a shallow personality. Yuki's mother read further and saw that it seemed friends and disciples of this woman were gathering for a memorial concert on the 15th anniversary of her passing. When Yuki Sanada asked Yuki's mother if she had been a fan, she replied that she had gone to a Kanade Midorikawa concert when she was young. Yuki's mother had shown him something on her phone, inviting him and saying he must be bored. Yuki had replied with a non-committal, When Yuki's mother said she already had 2 tickets and asked if he didn't want to go, Yuki looked surprised and said that wasn't it, while Yuki's mother mentioned he might not be interested in classical music anymore. Yuki, waving, said that while he might have been moving away from classical recently, it was not like he disliked it. Yuki's mother reminded him that he had started to get into jazz and rock bands along the way and said she appreciated his taste, making Yuki laugh. Yuki Sanada stood up with a gentle smile and said he had realized that there was more to music than just classical. He openly admitted his broadened musical outlook. Yuki's mother leaned her head on one hand, appearing thoughtful and nostalgic, and then with excitement, he turned to her and said that he still liked classical enough to play the piano at home. While smiling, Yuki's mother held up her phone and asked if it was truly okay. Yuki Sanada smiled brightly and said it was fine, suggesting they go. That night, outside a building, Yuki Sanada thought to himself that it might be nice to hear classical piano live for the first time in a while. On the day of the concert, they arrived at the venue and were awestruck by its impressive size. The performers in the memorial were all top-class pianists. As Yuki's mother explained, it was hosted by the Tenkoin group after all. Yuki Sanada admitted that when he was small, he didn't understand, but now he realized that Kanade Midorikawa was an incredible person. The Tenkoin Group was one of the largest companies in the world, and Yuki's mother reminded him about the head of the group, who had recently gone to space. Besides this, the group had teamed up with American companies and surfed the IT wave with assets in the hundreds of trillions and a long lineage. The company was a rare case among Japanese corporations. They discussed that the Tenkoin family was involved in many industries, including charity, sports, and the arts. So their support for a piano competition was not out of the ordinary. To Yuki's mother, this building truly belonged to a family leagues apart from common folk. Yuki Sanada responded with feigned interest and remarked on the woman's beauty. Just then, as Yuki's mother called to him, saying they were going in, Yuki Sanada acknowledged her. As the concert began, they realized they had received excellent seats. Yuki Sanada, convinced that he could not let down his guard for such an important event, was determined to give it his full attention. He reminded himself that this was, after all, a family experience. When a hush fell over the audience, a voice beside him said something softly. An announcement was made saying that they hadn't announced something in advance due to security reasons, but had a big guest with them that day. Both Yuki Sanada and Junna Tenkoin were surprised and tense. When another voice added they should give a warm welcome with a round of applause for the host of that day's concert, Junna said no way in shock, and Yuki Sanada had a tense expression, thinking it was really him. The announcer introduced the man as the head of the Tenkoin Group, Haruomi Tenkoin. The man smiled and said hello. Yuki Sanada realized with surprise that it was the same Haruomi Tenkoin he often saw on TV. Haruomi Tenkoin greeted the crowd saying, "Hello everyone." He introduced himself as Haruomi Tenkoin, as had just been said. Haruomi Tenkoin explained that Kanade Midorikawa had been his friend and that it had been 15 years since she passed away, but he confided that he had never forgotten her. Yuki Sanada, looking touched and contemplative, absorbed the tribute, and a female audience member nearby whispered that it was amazing. It seemed to Yuki Sanada that everyone felt the same way. Junna Tenkoin, standing to leave, said the concert seemed to be over and told Yuki Sanada they should head home. But Yuki Sanada, still sitting, thought they should wait when Haruomi Tenkoin mentioned that he actually had a daughter who also played the piano. He said her skills were nowhere near those of the professionals who played that day, but he asked the audience to indulge him with just one piece from his daughter's performance at the end. Junna Tenkoin, shocked, said it was not over yet. The scene then shifted to Junna, dressed in an ornate gown, surrounded by a sparkling aura. Two characters, Yuki Sanada and the short, spiky-haired character, stood in awe, slightly stunned by her beauty. Yuki Sanada had asked for confirmation, confirming her name as Junna. Yuki's mother had responded with a serious expression that she was Junna Tenkoin, the young lady of the Tenkoin family, and remarked that she resembled a princess. The short, spiky-haired character, blushing slightly, had repeated the word princess in their mind. He thought to himself that she was a beautiful girl. Looking at the scene of her playing the piano, accompanied by a maid, Yuki Sanada kept telling himself that such maidens really did exist, and again echoed to himself, another pavon for a dead princess, now with a more tense and serious expression. The scene shifted to a serene image of Junna Tenkoin elegantly playing the piano, her face calm and focused. By the time the performance ended, Junna Tenkoin realized it had finished, and the venue exploded with resounding applause. After the performance, Yuki Sanada sat among the cheering audience, clapping and honestly acknowledging with admiration that it had been a wonderful performance. He noticed Yuki's mother watching with tears streaming down her face. Yuki Sanada was stunned. He had never seen his mother cry before. Yuki Sanada was stunned, thinking he couldn't believe his mother was crying. Yuki's mother quickly tried to regain her composure, asking what he was looking at. Wiping her eyes, Yuki's mother told him not to misunderstand, saying that something had just gotten in her eye. Since her eyes hurt, Yuki's mother suggested they hurry home and told Yuki Sanada he could do whatever he wanted after that. Yuki's mother gave him some pocket money, telling him to enjoy himself, but to figure out how to get home on his own. She added that he shouldn't stay out too late. Yuki Sanada gasped, holding a large stack of bills with a stunned face. Yuki Sanada stood there stunned, thinking that she had left. Yuki Sanada wondered if his mom was embarrassed about him seeing her cry. She hadn't realized that she handed him 50,000 yen. As Yuki Sanada stared at the 10,000 yen bills, he wondered if it was okay to be happy about it. Yuki Sanada thought that if they told him to return it after he used it, it would not be a joke. Yuki Sanada thought it was the best day ever. With that amount of money, Yuki Sanada could buy clothes, eat meals, and still have some change left over after saving for the return fare. Junna Tenkoin then wondered what she should do first when suddenly she said, "Ah." He quickly crouched down to pick up Junna Tenkoin's purse and apologized for the incident. Yuki Sanada asked if Junna Tenkoin was hurt. But as Junna Tenkoin cleaned herself off and Yuki Sanada looked up at her face, he froze, stunned by what he saw. The girl had calmed down, and with a bright smile, facing the boy directly, she thanked him politely, her hand touching her chest. The boy, while handing over the purse, had responded with a stunned, "Oh wow," his expression showing that he was a bit flustered and still awestruck by her presence. He then mentioned that she was the piano player Junna Tenkoin, right, which had made the girl react with surprise and confusion, saying, "Ha." Yuki Sanada immediately wondered if he was being mistaken for someone suspicious. Both were shown standing together, and Yuki Sanada, while gesticulating, explained that he had watched the concert today, or rather listened to it, and then quickly added that it was really good. She thanked him, her smile radiant, and the boy clutched his chest and his mind, overwhelmed and thinking how adorable she was. Yuki then apologized for his words, saying that if a cute girl like her was in front of anyone, of course they would go for it. Junna wondered if this meant he was flirting. For a moment, they stood in silence. Yuki laughed it off, still smiling, and thought that even a guy like that was worth her attention. As Yuki Sanada walked away, a thought crossed his mind. Maybe Junna Tenkoin was just too sheltered to respond properly. That would explain her confused reaction. Out of nowhere, his two classmates appeared. Two girls then suddenly approached Yuki Sanada and greeted him. One asked if he remembered her. A man came by and politely asked the girls if they would go out with them. Two men were seen approaching, with one of them saying hi. Without thinking, Yuki Sanada grabbed Junna Tenkoin's hand. Afterward, a man accused Junna Tenkoin of having a boyfriend and said if she did, she should have said so right away. Junna Tenkoin appeared tense, and Yuki Sanada maintained a neutral expression. The man eventually walked away, and Yuki Sanada reassured Junna Tenkoin not to worry about him. He advised that in the future it would be better to ignore people like that and move on quickly. Junna Tenkoin thanked him, but wondered if it wasn't rude to ignore someone. Yuki Sanada replied that returning a smile when one had no interest wasn't good for either party. Junna Tenkoin asked if that was really how it was, and he simply said that was how he saw it. Junna Tenkoin apologized, saying it was her first time walking in the city alone and she didn't know anything about the world. She thanked him for teaching her. When Yuki Sanada asked Junna Tenkoin if it was her first time walking alone in the city, she admitted with an embarrassed smile that she had actually snuck out. This shocked Yuki Sanada, who recalled that the maid had been supporting Junna Tenkoin during the performance. He deduced that if she had snuck out, normally she must have someone taking care of her. Yuki Sanada asked if Junna Tenkoin usually had a maid or a bodyguard nearby, and she confirmed with a bright smile that it was true. Yuki Sanada reacted with disbelief, saying seriously, to which Junna Tenkoin replied that he knew so much. She explained that that day, there was a moment when she happened to be alone, thinking that might be her only chance. She had decided to go out. Yuki Sanada understood then that she had lived her whole life like a bird in a cage. Yuki Sanada reminded her that if she went out without permission, it wasn't good, as they were probably worried about her. At the very least, she should let them know where she was. Junna Tenkoin admitted that Yuki Sanada was right, and with an exasperated face, thought that, as she had suspected, adventuring really was impossible for her. She stood up, thanked Yuki Sanada, and said she would go home now. Yuki Sanada suddenly called out for Junna Tenkoin to wait, stunned by his own action. He wondered to himself what he was doing, why he had stopped her. Normally, Junna Tenkoin was a stranger. He would have urged her to go home, and that would have been the end of it. As Junna Tenkoin started to leave, Yuki Sanada thought that it should have been fine for them to part ways. That day, the two of them wouldn't normally have met there. Yuki Sanada told Junna Tenkoin that although they had already disbanded, he was once part of a band. When Junna Tenkoin asked in surprise, he continued his story. He explained that their vocalist was American and had to return to his country due to his parents' circumstances. Despite that, the band wasn't satisfied with how things ended. That was last summer when Yuki Sanada was 14, and they had all chased after the vocalist to America. He said they picked up the vocalist and went on a whirlwind live tour across the US. Looking back, Yuki Sanada admitted it was totally reckless. At first, Yuki Sanada and the band hadn't been doing well, and empty cans were flying onto the stage. Things got worse when fights even broke out in the back of the audience. But as they kept going, they gradually became more popular. A farewell concert in New York had been a huge success. Yuki Sanada told Junna Tenkoin that the band had disbanded, but a pro singer had emerged from their group after the live show. Someone from a record company had come to the dressing room and scouted the vocalist. That vocalist was now active as a singer in America. He smiled, saying it was like a dream, and with a hesitant, embarrassed expression, told her that what he was trying to say was that even someone like him, who couldn't speak English very well, had suddenly gone to America and had been able to do a month-long live tour. He said he believed she could have her own adventure too. He asked her if she hadn't come out there for a reason. Junna Tenkoin, still overwhelmed, replied with an then asked if he had friends on his adventure. Yuki admitted he did invite someone, but before he could continue, Junna anxiously wondered if that meant something. Yuki bluntly asked if perhaps she didn't have any friends. Her face turned completely pale. Yuki explained that he did have friends, but at Fuya Academy everyone was very proper, so he didn't have anyone who would join him on an adventure. Junna said she was very happy to hear his story, and that she couldn't do it alone. Yuki Sanada composed himself with a blush firming his face and declared that for that day, he would be that kind of friend to her. Junna Tenkoin was stunned, and hearts filled her eyes as Yuki Sanada invited her to go on an adventure together. Yuki Sanada thought to himself that that day was the day he met Junna Tenkoin. Yuki Sanada reflected that in life there were many encounters. Yuki Sanada acknowledged that those encounters were often overlooked because of a lack of courage, being busy, or finding it troublesome. Yuki Sanada noted that it wasn't uncommon for them to be ignored. But Yuki Sanada told himself that the encounter on that day became eternal. After their meeting, Junna Tenkoin and Yuki Sanada were seen walking together outside, both smiling genuinely. She was holding onto his arm affectionately, and the mood between them was light and happy. He recalled that an hour earlier they had both introduced themselves formally. Yuki Sanada had suggested that since they were the same age, they should skip the formalities. Then he had asked her with a warm smile if she had any adventures she wanted to try. Junna Tenkoin had shared that she wanted to try flying in the sky. The word sky lingered in Yuki Sanada's thoughts. As Junna Tenkoin went on, Junna Tenkoin, with a gentle face, stood against a cloudy, ethereal backdrop, her long hair flowing softly in the wind. She thought quietly that she wanted to soar in the outside world, free like a bird. Yuki Sanada had looked up at the sky, repeating the word sky to himself as if in agreement and awe. Junna Tenkoin had then returned to reality, her smile turning awkward and embarrassed as she blushed and thought that such a dream was impossible. Yuki Sanada had responded by saying he remembered a regular customer who was a skydiving instructor. He suggested trying to contact that person. When Junna Tenkoin asked in surprise, Yuki Sanada had already pulled out his phone and made a call, introducing himself as being from Sanada Bicycles. She answered the call, her face expressionless as she listened and absorbed the information, saying she understood. After hanging up with a tense face, Yuki Sanada explained that he had been told that it was impossible to do skydiving on such short notice, especially for minors, as it required parental consent and a prior reservation. Junna Tenkoin canceled the call and acknowledged the news with a disappointed face. Yuki Sanada then scrolled through his phone, mentioning that although there were other sky sports, like hang gliding and paragliding, the only thing they could do that day was bungee jumping. Stunned, Junna Tenkoin had repeated the words bungee jumping, her face tense and scared. Yuki then mentioned that there was a nearby amusement park where they could bungee jump. He asked her if she had ever tried bungee jumping before. She replied that she hadn't. Yuki smiled and said that was good. He added that he hadn't tried it either, so they could enjoy it together. Junna Tenkoin's eyes widened with surprise and wonder. Yuki Sanada suggested that they go, looking at her. As they stood there, Junna Tenkoin hesitantly replied with a soft Yuki Sanada, facing Junna Tenkoin and raising his hands for emphasis, explained that bungee jumping involved leaping from a high place with a rubber cord attached. He then asked if she was really going to do it. When Junna Tenkoin didn't respond, Yuki Sanada reminded her that she had said she wanted to try flying in the sky. He added with a slightly awkward tone, scratching his head with one hand, that bungee jumping might actually be closer to falling than flying. But, he continued, when someone tried something they'd never done before, everyone ended up flying with their heart. Yuki Sanada then smiled kindly, saying he was sure she would be okay, and explained that in a sense, once she jumped, she was already flying. Junna Tenkoin acknowledged this and agreed, her smile returning. Yuki Sanada then reminded her that she should change before they went. With that, the story returned to where it had begun. Back on the rooftop, they started the countdown. Yuki Sanada said, 1, and Junna Tenkoin, tense and frightened, cried, 2. Yuki Sanada, with a shout of bungee, jumped off the rooftop. As Junna Tenkoin watched Yuki Sanada scream, "Ah!" Yuki Sanada lay on a large cushion smiling and laughing as a man approached to take off his harness. Junna Tenkoin stood nearby, watching him and thinking that he was laughing. She was processing his bravery. Then Yuki Sanada stood up with a huge smile and stretched his arms, shouting that it was her turn next. A man called for the next person to come forward. A staff member directly asked Junna Tenkoin if she was going to back out, making Junna tense up. With a close-up of her foot at the edge, Junna Tenkoin replied firmly that she was not backing out. Junna Tenkoin stood on the edge and with her hands clasped in front of her, said that she was jumping. Yuki Sanada admitted he was scared too, and that his heart was racing. Yet he said he would muster the courage to jump. And he did. Even though he had said he was scared before, Yuki Sanada jumped without hesitation. With that thought, she started the countdown. As the staff counted 2, she remembered he always kept moving forward. He was that kind of person. As the count reached 2, Yuki Sanada calmly told her that those who couldn't fly would always be left behind, that the world wouldn't wait for anyone. Junna Tenkoin clenched her teeth at the words, and without waiting for the count to finish, jumped off herself, saying 1, then bungee. He sat beside her and said, "Good job." Another man nearby told Junna she could leave. But before she could leave, he grabbed her arm and silently thought. Apologizing to Yuki Sanada, Junna Tenkoin asked if it would be all right to lean on him a bit. Junna Tenkoin rested her head gently on his shoulder, and Yuki Sanada felt his heart pounding, thinking that moment was just fine as it was. Yuki Sanada remarked that he had thought the moment would be more calming. Yuki Sanada tried to calm himself down, thinking there should be no misunderstandings, absolutely none. It was just in his head, he told himself, repeating that he needed to calm down too. Then both of them jumped. To Yuki Sanada, it felt like wings sprouted from his back as they leaped, but it felt more like falling than flying. When they landed, they were seen standing beside each other. To confirm the result, a staff member checked the time. Yuki Sanada admitted that it was quite high and said that Junna Tenkoin had flown really well. Junna Tenkoin hugged Yuki Sanada and said that she had thought she would be left behind and had wanted to chase after him. Yuki Sanada then extended his hand to her, saying, "Let's go." Junna Tenkoin stared at him in shock, her heart racing. She thought to herself that this was bad, wondering what she should do. Yuki Sanada, with his back turned, said that if she said it like that, it troubled him. Yuki Sanada, with a tense face, quickly explained that Junna Tenkoin had not troubled him at all and began to say something more. But Junna Tenkoin, without waiting for him to finish, said never mind and suggested they go. Yuki Sanada replied weakly. A while later, Yuki Sanada, with a stunned expression, asked if Junna Tenkoin attended Kikote Academy. Junna Tenkoin, smiling face blushing slightly, replied that she did and asked if he knew it. Yuki Sanada admitted he learned about it only while researching possible high schools to apply to, and agreed that the school seemed wonderful. Junna Tenkoin explained it was an integrated school with education from kindergarten to high school, and mentioned it was an amazing place where many children of politicians and CEOs attended. Yuki Sanada thought to himself that it was indeed a prestigious school. Junna Tenkoin said she would be moving up a grade and asked if Yuki Sanada had already decided on a high school. He replied that nothing was clear yet, and it was already getting dark. When they reached the street, Yuki Sanada mentioned he would take the train home and asked Junna Tenkoin if he should escort her home. Junna Tenkoin calmly explained that if she turned on her mobile device and contacted them, a pickup car would come for her. Yuki Sanada asked if she would be scolded. With a gentle smile, Junna Tenkoin admitted she probably would be, but accepted that it couldn't be helped since it was the result of her own actions. Yuki Sanada, feeling partly responsible since he had been the one who dragged her around, wondered half seriously if they should get scolded together. Junna Tenkoin told him not to worry about it. As they began to walk, Yuki Sanada asked if she would contact her ride soon. Junna Tenkoin replied that she wanted to wait just a little longer. Junna Tenkoin, looking cheerful and radiant as she walked with Yuki Sanada, explained her desire for independence. She mentioned wanting to ride the train more often and said it would be quicker for her family to pick her up if she moved closer to her house. She added that she wanted to change clothes as well. Yuki Sanada replied that it sounded good. They agreed to move to a station in the city for the time being. After freshening up, Junna excitedly shared how amazing she found the powder room, mentioning the presence of a dresser and expressing surprise that such a place to change even existed. Yuki explained that there were both paid and free powder rooms, and in some cases, one could even rent a room or booth where taking a shower was possible. Junna then remarked that Yuki seemed to know everything, while Yuki, embarrassed, brushed off the compliment. Junna continued, saying that from amusement park attractions to how to ride the train and even how to order at a cafe, Yuki appeared knowledgeable about everything, even that one could rent a place to change. Yuki downplayed his knowledge again, insisting it wasn't much. Junna Tenkoin, with a gentle smile, told Yuki Sanada that from her perspective, he did know a lot. Moments later, Yuki Sanada handed Junna Tenkoin a present. Junna Tenkoin was shocked and asked. Yuki Sanada, smiling and a bit bashful with one hand at his face, explained that he had come across the gift while she was changing. He said he wanted it to be a memento of that day. Junna Tenkoin repeated the phrase "a memento" softly, appearing deep in thought as she considered the meaning behind his words. Yuki Sanada then gestured for her to open the present, encouraging her to take a look. A wide shot from behind showed the two standing together by a window, capturing a mood of farewell. Junna Tenkoin thought it was already time to say goodbye. When she opened the box, she saw a blank notebook and said softly that this was it. Yuki Sanada told Junna Tenkoin that her adventure wouldn't end with just wanting to fly in the sky anymore. He said that from now on, she should write down what she wanted to do in that notebook so she could actually do it. He explained that if Junna Tenkoin did that one by one, he thought she would eventually grasp her own soul. Yuki Sanada then suggested calling it the Things I Want to Do notebook, but quickly thought, no, that wasn't right. Junna Tenkoin paused briefly, then softly suggested Adventure Notebook as the name. Yuki Sanada solemnly repeated it, and Junna agreed that maybe that was right, creating a moment filled with sparkling tension. Yuki Sanada thought to himself that he hoped this notebook would one day become a guiding light for Junna, even if they had to part ways. Junna Tenkoin then noticed the adventure notebook and realized there was something else as well. She asked in surprise about the additional item, and Yuki Sanada, grinning and scratching the back of his head, said it was a bonus. Tearfully smiling, Junna Tenkoin said she would treasure it for a lifetime and thanked him. Yuki Sanada responded with humility, saying it wasn't something grand, while Junna Tenkoin smiled gently, and Yuki Sanada thought that as long as Junna Tenkoin was happy, that was enough. As they walked through the bustling lobby, Yuki Sanada wondered if it was really time to say goodbye. Junna Tenkoin heard the sound of a piano. Yuki Sanada called her name, and she wondered if he had heard it too. Then Junna saw a crowd gathered around the piano. Yuki told her it was a street piano, and she responded quietly. A crowd had gathered around a street piano where a young girl was playing, her performance drawing eager ears and several phones recording the moment. Yuki Sanada explained that in bustling places like stations or busy city corners, these so-called street corner pianos were set up for anyone to enjoy and play. Yuki Sanada remarked it was quite a culture. Yuki Sanada then leaned closer and asked Junna Tenkoin how she felt about playing a duet together afterwards. Blushing, she agreed softly. The pianist on stage hesitantly asked what song they should play, admitting she usually only played classical music. But the unnamed girl at the piano calmly suggested Sing Sing Sing, a classic jazz piece, making herself tense up at the thought. Yuki Sanada asked Junna Tenkoin if she knew the song, and she admitted she didn't. But once she heard it, she would understand. He handed her his phone, and she held it up, listening intently. She then smiled and confidently said that now she could play it. Shocked, Yuki Sanada asked if she really could play it just after one listen. She brushed her hair back and replied that it was an unfamiliar song, but she could definitely play it. Thinking to himself, Yuki Sanada wondered if she truly could perfectly copy a song after hearing it just once. Then, they went to check if they could play a duet and made a reservation for the next round. With a resigned look, Yuki Sanada thought that there were really monsters in the world. Junna Tenkoin showed the recording on her phone and with a confident smile said she could do it. Her opponent asked if Junna Tenkoin was actually a genius, while Junna Tenkoin modestly said she was just good at copying. Junna Tenkoin explained that she didn't have her own style. Her piano teacher once told her that it was just like being a computer and advised her to play her own music. Junna Tenkoin remarked that her teacher sounded pretty strict, and Yuki Sanada, genuinely impressed, responded with a wow. Yuki Sanada remembered to himself how he had once told Junna Tenkoin that he hated it when she didn't smile. Trying to cheer her up, Yuki Sanada had said that the ability to play a song after just one listen was quite a talent and that Junna Tenkoin should have more confidence in herself. Yuki Sanada explained that music started with listening, and one couldn't copy it without a good ear. Yuki Sanada then turned to her with a bright expression and told her she was amazing. Just then a teacher told them it was their turn. Yuki Sanada, with a smile, said, "Let's go," and gestured towards the stage. Junna Tenkoin, now with a relieved smile, replied firmly yes. Yuki Sanada admitted that it was a little nerve-wracking for him, since he hadn't practiced much. Junna Tenkoin revealed that a long time ago her parents had met at a piano concert. Junna Tenkoin's mother played the piano, and her father had come to listen to her performing. Yuki Sanada repeated, "Is that so?" and then suddenly realized something. Suddenly, the atmosphere between them shifted. Junna Tenkoin, with vulnerable sincerity, said that the story sounded just like them. Yuki Sanada echoed that thought in his mind, realizing with widened eyes and a racing heart that it truly did resemble their own situation. Flustered, Junna Tenkoin quickly apologized, calling her words sudden and strange, but Yuki Sanada, still blushing, reassured her that it was not awkward at all. With a smile, he added that people did weird things sometimes. He admitted that he, too, could suddenly say things that didn't make sense. Yuki Sanada shared one of his own embarrassing experiences, recalling a time he told a woman he had just met that he used to be in a band and had performed live in America. He confessed that it hadn't been true. That day, sitting together at the piano about to play, both Yuki Sanada and Junna Tenkoin silently wished that their time together wouldn't end. Yuki Sanada thought about how, after leaving the amusement park, he could have immediately called for a ride, yet for some reason, he hadn't. At the piano, their hands moved across the keys, and Junna Tenkoin softly said she felt the same way. She had turned to him with a gentle smile and assured him that together, they could do it. Yuki Sanada had smiled warmly and admitted that he was having fun. The audience had buzzed with excitement as they watched the performance. To Junna Tenkoin at that moment, it had truly felt as if the world consisted of just the two of them. Suddenly, the scene seemed to transform into a world of fantasy. Yuki Sanada and Junna Tenkoin continued playing the piano, neither uttering a word, but both smiling and laughing freely. When the performance ended, the sound of the piano keys faded, and the audience erupted into applause. Yuki Sanada, in profile, acknowledged that it was over. Junna Tenkoin stood under a shower of falling flower petals, smiling over her shoulder with a content and nostalgic expression. She reflected that she had enjoyed playing the piano. Yuki Sanada, with a surprised but thoughtful expression, remarked that it had been a while. The girl, with a serene smile and closed eyes, reminded herself that it wasn't good to spoil a happy mood. As Yuki Sanada, Junna Tenkoin, and Chikage Yamabuki finished at the piano, she reflected that cherishing the present and its joys was, after all, the most important thing. Chikage Yamabuki had clapped her hands and said "Bravo" with a face full of emotion, making the moment even more poignant. A maid had approached and with a formal and clear voice told Junna Tenkoin that it was time for her to go home. Junna Tenkoin had replied saying "Chikage," while both she and Yuki Sanada had looked serious. Yuki Sanada looked surprised and thoughtful, questioning whether this maid was the same Chikage and repeating the name himself. He thought that the maid seemed very familiar. With a serious face, Yuki Sanada reflected that it seemed they had finally been found out. Yuki Sanada believed that the adventure was now over, feeling it was almost a miracle they hadn't been discovered until now. The timing, he thought, was just right. Junna Tenkoin had told Yuki Sanada with tears in her eyes that they would never meet again. And without even being able to exchange contact information, their connection had ended. At that moment, a man had approached Chikage Yamabuki, greeting her and confirming that she was the young lady's maid. The boy who introduced himself as Yuki Sanada asked the girl's name. She seemed surprised and didn't respond. Then Chikage Yamabuki suddenly appeared and said, "Come outside." Both Yuki Sanada and Junna Tenkoin were stunned. Outside, Yuki Sanada said to Chikage Yamabuki that there was nothing inappropriate between him and Junna Tenkoin, but Chikage Yamabuki just told him with a cold face to come with her. Junna Tenkoin held Yuki Sanada's arm and told him she would explain everything properly. Yuki Sanada, still stunned, simply said, "Yeah," reacting almost automatically. He wondered in embarrassment why he had agreed so quickly. Outside, Yuki Sanada saw a luxury car and thought that the driver's expression was intimidating. Chikage Yamabuki then said that as Yuki Sanada finished saying "maid-san," she punched him. With a shocked face, Junna Tenkoin called out Chikage Yamabuki's name. As the punch hovered just inches from Yuki Sanada's face, the maid, Chikage Yamabuki, smiled gently and said it was just a joke. Yuki Sanada thought that was definitely not a joke. Yuki Sanada, still processing what had just happened, asked Chikage Yamabuki whether she practiced martial arts. She explained calmly that she was of ninja descent. Besides serving as a maid and bodyguard for the young lady, Chikage Yamabuki said she possessed martial arts skills. Chikage Yamabuki added that Yuki Sanada hadn't even closed his eyes when a fist was coming toward him, and asked if he had experience or some skills. Yuki Sanada, with a serious face, replied that his mother had drilled self-defense into him, but insisted he had no real combat experience. Junna Tenkoin, sitting with her eyes closed and hands clasped, apologized, admitting that it was all her fault. In a tense moment, Chikage Yamabuki said she understood, while Yuki Sanada recalled that, in hindsight, it was like he had been hitting on her, which had frightened him. Junna Tenkoin apologized again for making them worry, and Chikage Yamabuki said she was glad Junna was safe. Junna Tenkoin mentioned that she had troubled Koshiro Yamabuki as well, which made Yuki Sanada repeat the name in confusion. At that moment, a man in a suit appeared. Junna Tenkoin turned to him with a cheerful face and said she would introduce him properly. Junna had then introduced the maid, Chikage Yamabuki, and the driver, Koshiro Yamabuki, and told Yuki Sanada that they were uncle and niece, both personally assigned to her. Yuki Sanada responded in mild surprise, saying, "Oh, really?" Chikage Yamabuki, with a stern face, said that if the girl was going to run away, she wished she had consulted her first. The maid explained with a stern face that if Junna Tenkoin had honestly told her what was going on, she would have cooperated and helped. Junna Tenkoin responded with a shocked "huh." The maid revealed that she had noticed the young lady seemed troubled and thought that something like this might happen one day, knowing Junna Tenkoin had no friends she could confide in. However, she added that she never thought she would be outsmarted like this and admitted it made her sad. She reminded Junna Tenkoin that she had claimed to have no friends, yet her actions suggested otherwise. The scene was tense, with dramatic lighting underscoring the moment. Chikage Yamabuki then turned the conversation back to the incident, saying that if she had been there, Junna Tenkoin wouldn't have been bitten by a stray dog, mentioning that she had considered dealing with the animal herself so it wouldn't bother Junna Tenkoin again. However, if Junna Tenkoin was set on protecting the dog, Chikage Yamabuki said, then there was nothing she could do, her words echoing as she turned to leave. As the tense moment passed, Chikage Yamabuki told the dog she would let it go this time and instructed it to leave. The dog seemed to freeze at this. Then Chikage Yamabuki turned to Junna Tenkoin and said it was time to go home. Suddenly, a voice called to Junna Tenkoin. Her eye widened in surprise. Yuki Sanada said something, and Junna Tenkoin agreed, acknowledging he was right. She then addressed him, Yuki-kun. With a sorrowful face, Junna Tenkoin bid him farewell. Yuki Sanada remained silent and wondered internally whether it was really okay to leave things like that. Yuki Sanada knew that if they parted ways now, there was a high chance he would never see Junna Tenkoin again, making this moment the only real opportunity to act if he wanted to stop her from leaving. Still, Yuki Sanada worried about what would happen if Junna Tenkoin refused, thinking that maybe he was the only one who got excited about what had happened between them. Yuki Sanada admitted to himself that it was scary, thinking in a strange sort of way that even bungee jumping felt less frightening than what he was about to do. She told him with tears in her eyes that she wanted to chase after him. Yuki Sanada thought that she had jumped despite her fear she had taken that first step. Yuki Sanada mustered his courage and called out to her, asking when they would meet again. She turned back, surprised. With tears in his eyes and a shaky voice, Yuki Sanada said he didn't want to part like this. He begged to exchange contact information. Junna Tenkoin, with her hands clasped and a face radiant with joy, said she had felt the same way, admitting that she had been thinking the exact same thing. Suddenly, Chikage Yamabuki appeared angrily, demanding that Junna Tenkoin know her place, and swiped her hand at her. Junna Tenkoin was caught off guard, and Yuki Sanada was left startled at the unexpected confrontation. Chikage Yamabuki then told Yuki Sanada that his world was different from theirs, and that they were not the same kind of people. Yuki Sanada repeated her words, not the same kind of people, and then asked her whether they were friends or not. Chikage Yamabuki replied that she was a maid and the girl was her master. Yuki Sanada responded that was why the girl snuck out without consulting Chikage Yamabuki. Yuki Sanada insisted that if Chikage Yamabuki was truly closest to the girl, she should try being a friend she could do silly things with. Yuki Sanada argued that their worlds weren't truly different since they all lived under the same sky on the same earth. There was no above or below. Chikage Yamabuki shouted back that there was indeed a difference. Junna Tenkoin, with a terrified and desperate expression, had shouted for Yuki Sanada to stop. Yuki Sanada, still confused, had repeated the word family, seeking clarification. Junna Tenkoin had explained that Chikage Yamabuki was born into such a family that served theirs. Chikage Yamabuki, with a stoic face, began to explain about her background. She said that there was a ninja clan, the Yamabuki clan, which had served the Tenkoin family since ancient times. All the butlers and maids in the Tenkoin family were blood relatives descending from the Yamabuki clan. Among them, Chikage Yamabuki had been assigned to serve Junna Tenkoin from birth. Yuki Sanada repeated ninjas and commented whether Chikage Yamabuki should show him the ninja art of the shadow clone technique. Chikage Yamabuki replied with a straight face that there was no way anyone could use such cartoonish ninja arts, adding that she was just kidding, making Yuki Sanada think that this made. Yuki Sanada thought, stunned, and asked if she could really do that. Chikage Yamabuki explained that actual ninjas now operated more like modern agents, handling espionage, VIP protection, sabotage, and with a cold face added assassination. Yuki Sanada asked in a trembling voice if that was a joke too, to which Chikage Yamabuki replied expressionless that such roles were part of the job. Then with an intense gaze, Chikage Yamabuki said to Yuki Sanada that the Tenkoin family was scary. The blonde boy stood tense and frightened before her. While she said that when she did something, she did not hold back. Yuki Sanada thought she was a demon. She explained that a stray dog daring to touch the young lady had 3 choices: had its bones broken, its house burned down, or got run over by a car. In the end, she told him, they would be wrapped up and tossed to the bottom of the sea. Yuki Sanada's face turned to raw horror as he muttered, if that was a joke, she had a bad sense of humor. Junna Tenkoin spoke with a smile, saying now they should keep the jokes there. She said she truly enjoyed today and didn't want the two most important people to her to end it by fighting. The maid then smiled and said, "Oh, young lady, you hold this man dear." This left Junna Tenkoin stunned and made Yuki Sanada blush. He begged the maid, Chikage Yamabuki, not to say such a thing. Junna Tenkoin, her face red, answered that that was simply what she thought. Chikage Yamabuki suddenly exclaimed, "Anyway," and the tension was broken. Chikage Yamabuki turned serious again and said that as long as she was there, Yuki Sanada shouldn't even think he could get the young lady's contact information. Chikage Yamabuki declared that their interaction was done for today and that this was final. Yuki Sanada, his voice choked with frustration, refuted her claims, declaring that she had no right to say that. He stared at her, desperately thinking that in front of Junna Tenkoin, he had to make Chikage Yamabuki accept him without resorting to violence. Chikage Yamabuki, arms crossed, said he finally understood and told him never to do something again. Yuki Sanada interrupted, saying he understood and would give up on getting her contact information. Yuki Sanada, blushing with a passionate face, declared that instead he would take the entrance exam for Kikote Academy. One of the girls mentioned that Kikote Academy was an integrated school, but she had heard that external students could join upon entering high school. Another girl asked if that place was the Kikote Academy. Junna Tenkoin, with long hair, blushingly asked Yuki Sanada if it could be. Yuki Sanada firmly said he would take the exam at Kikote and attend the same school as Yuki Sanada's love interest. His face flushed as he earnestly asked her to become his girlfriend. Yuki Sanada felt he had taken a huge jump. Junna Tenkoin said they had just met, but she already liked him. Junna Tenkoin and Yuki Sanada had stood facing each other, a distance between them. The world around had faded into sparkles as Yuki Sanada wondered if he could soar into the sky that day. Then, at the venue entrance, Chikage Yamabuki and Koshiro Yamabuki stood by a car. Yuki Sanada had wondered if instead he would fall straight into the depths of despair. Chikage Yamabuki rages with an intense expression, calling him an ingrate. Chikage Yamabuki, tense and emotional, repeated to Junna Tenkoin that she shouldn't surround herself with such ungrateful people, urging her to leave. Junna calmly addressed Chikage, asking her to come with her. Chikage acknowledged her request and composed herself. As they turned to go, Chikage glanced back and muttered Yuki-kun. There, Junna apologized for the interruption and stated that she didn't believe she should give Yuki Sanada a flippant response, asking for time. Yuki Sanada accepted that without hesitation, smiling gently. He pointed out that either way, it would only be in 1 year, and added that if he failed the exam, he would graciously accept his loss. Junna Tenkoin smiled gently and asked him if he would pass, to which Yuki Sanada replied that it was the plan. Chikage Yamabuki asked if he was okay with that, and Junna Tenkoin suggested exchanging phone numbers. She thought to herself that she couldn't know for certain what would happen in 1 year, but she had learned from books how to make friends. She said they should meet every now and then to stay in touch. Chikage Yamabuki had reacted in panic, saying, "Milady, that's..." But before she could finish, a voice interrupted, telling her to wait. A man then appeared, saying he had been in his car to avoid interfering in his child's affairs, but now had his suspicions. Junna Tenkoin and Yuki Sanada both called him father in stunned recognition. Suddenly the man removed his mustache, revealing himself, and Yuki Sanada recognized him in shock as Haruomi Tenkoin. Junna Tenkoin, astounded, asked her father if he had been there all along, and Haruomi Tenkoin replied that he had, wondering why she hadn't noticed. Yuki Sanada quickly jumped in, introducing himself nervously and apologizing for having dragged Junna Tenkoin there without her father's permission. He thought to himself that he had to gain the upper hand by speaking first. Haruomi Tenkoin, however, calmly said it was fine, adding that Junna Tenkoin was also responsible for it. Junna Tenkoin looked relieved in the background. Haruomi Tenkoin, while remaining calm, told Yuki Sanada that he was impressed by how openly he had spoken his mind. He then added that regardless of any competition, if Yuki Sanada passed the exam, they should have a proper conversation. Yuki Sanada, shown as a chibi version surrounded by small birds, panicked, and wondered if Haruomi Tenkoin was actually angry. Confused, Yuki Sanada responded with, "Huh? Haruomi Tenkoin," his face shown in profile with a wistful smile, said it brought back memories. The father then explained that he had been like Yuki Sanada when he got married, always rebelling against authority whenever he had the chance. He said he wished they could see eye to eye on this matter, but admitted he couldn't just sit back and stay quiet, even as an outsider. He added that when he became a father and the head of the Tenkoin group, his perspective had changed. He confessed that he would have liked Junna Tenkoin to find a suitor of noble birth. His fiancée had believed, even if she thought it was old-fashioned, that the Tenkoin clan was very special. Yuki Sanada remembered her saying that. Haruomi Tenkoin then pointed out that Junna Tenkoin, despite everything, had managed to slip out of their control that day and had brought him to a boy who had nothing to his name. Yuki Sanada thought this was the worst situation imaginable. Junna Tenkoin asked what had happened and said it would be of no consequence to prevent Yuki Sanada from ever meeting Junna Tenkoin again. If Yuki Sanada did nothing, Junna Tenkoin would vanish from his life and he would go back to the boring world he had always lived in. Chikage Yamabuki had warned that the Tenkoin were not to be trifled with, and that when she did her job she made sure to be ruthless. Yuki Sanada, seeing the seriousness in her face, acknowledged to himself that what she said was certainly no joke. Haruomi Tenkoin, tense, clenched his fist and shifted the conversation. Yuki Sanada admitted that he came from a single-parent family and that his home was a small bicycle shop in a downtown area, with his mother being the only one who gave him a proper education. However, he asserted that he didn't think it was fair to analyze him based on those factors alone, such as fame, wealth, or status. Yuki Sanada, blushing yet determined, declared with energy that he would use his own strength from then on and do his best to become a man worthy of Junna-san. Yuki Sanada then boldly declared that he would pass the entrance exam and get into Kikote Academy. If he failed, he promised never to see Junna Tenkoin again. The man in suit repeated that Yuki Sanada was the son of a bicycle shop owner and a single mother. Yuki Sanada confirmed it, asking, "What of it?" With his eyes closed and a thoughtful expression, Haruomi Tenkoin replied that it was nothing, saying he had simply remembered a certain man. He began to recall a story. The man was the son of a small car shop owner who had lost his mother at an early age and was raised by his father. Eventually, the man got married to a wealthy woman. The blonde boy listened and thought that the story sounded just like his own life. Out loud, Yuki Sanada admitted there were indeed people like that. Haruomi Tenkoin then asked if that meant the man was living happily ever after, explaining that the man had wanted to marry the woman he loved, and so had abandoned his father, who had raised him kindly despite being poor and covered with oil. He was adopted into the woman's wealthy family. Haruomi Tenkoin explained that if he hadn't been adopted, he wouldn't have made any difference to anyone at all. Even when his father fell ill, he had merely sent money to him to keep him alive, admitting he was a poor excuse of a son, as Junna Tenkoin observed. Haruomi Tenkoin questioned whether someone like him could ever truly live happily. He admitted that he had lost more than he could ever gain. Then Haruomi Tenkoin apologized for his tangent and told them he understood their sentiments, asking if they had any further questions. Yuki Sanada had answered with a serious expression, saying that he only planned on seeing her again once he had passed the Kikote exam. Haruomi Tenkoin asked if that was really okay with him, reminding him that it was important to stay in touch. Junna Tenkoin, full of excitement, suggested that in that case, her father should allow them to exchange contact info as friends. Junna Tenkoin and Yuki Sanada both expressed their deep gratitude, their faces lighting up with pure joy as they thanked the man. Chikage Yamabuki turned to Haruomi Tenkoin and asked if he was really fine with the agreement, reminding him that telling the mistress would be challenging. Haruomi Tenkoin said he would persuade her somehow, thinking that it wasn't as if they were officially dating, much less getting married. Yuki Sanada maintained a calm outlook, saying that he wouldn't get his hopes up just because he had made a friend. Haruomi Tenkoin had added that he would set some rules for Yuki Sanada meeting Junna Tenkoin. Chikage Yamabuki had responded that she hoped so. Haruomi Tenkoin had said that first, Yuki Sanada must never meet Junna Tenkoin alone, and Chikage Yamabuki would be present with them at all times. If they plan to go somewhere far away, Yuki Sanada must submit a travel plan in advance and never interfere with Junna Tenkoin's studies, club activities, or duties as a daughter of the Tenkoin family. With a stern face, Haruomi Tenkoin reminded Yuki Sanada that he and Yuki Sanada were only friends, and that he must refrain from any behavior or speech that crossed that line. Apologizing for the intrusion, Haruomi Tenkoin then asked Yuki Sanada to tell him more about his relationships with his peers. If anyone was affiliated with the Tenkoin, they had to proceed with great caution. Yuki Sanada responded affirmatively. Koshiro Yamabuki then stated that Yuki Sanada's contact information would be shared with Chikage, Koshiro, and others. Haruomi Tenkoin sternly reminded them that their relationship with Junna Tenkoin must be kept a secret for the time being. He emphasized that their family and friends could never know, and posting anything about it on social media was absolutely prohibited. He added that Junna Tenkoin's face must be completely hidden from the internet, no matter what. He then said that there was one more important matter, and with a serious face, raised one finger and declared loudly that the curfew would be 7 p.m. They replied with a yes. He crossed his arms and glanced to the side, stating that that was about it, and explained that the rules applied not only to Yuki-kun, but also to Junna. She too had to follow these rules, and she acknowledged this, saying yes. Then he asked Yuki-kun if he had any objections. Yuki-kun responded with none, and Haruomi Tenkoin said it was a promise. He continued that if that promise was broken or if Yuki-kun engaged in behavior that violated public order and morals, then he repeated that if there were no objections, he would accept Yuki Sanada as her friend. Yuki Sanada nodded, and with steely determination said that he understood and he would do his best. The security man then suggested they also exchange numbers, making the gesture more formal. Yuki Sanada asked Chikage Yamabuki if it would be okay for them to become friends as well. Chikage Yamabuki immediately and bluntly refused, saying, "No, impossible, I don't want to." Yuki Sanada, disappointed, replied that such a reaction was harsh. Chikage Yamabuki reiterated, stressing that their relationship was strictly professional, and she saw no need to be friends. Yuki Sanada argued that it would be hard to work together if they weren't on good terms. Chikage Yamabuki then turned to Yuki Sanada with a cold stare and said she would make sure to keep a very close eye on him so he didn't make the mistake of laying his grubby hands on Junna Tenkoin. Yuki Sanada, sweating, replied that he understood. Junna Tenkoin thought that if Chikage Yamabuki and Yuki Sanada didn't get along, it would be lonely for Chikage Yamabuki, and she hoped they could get along together. Chikage Yamabuki, still holding Yuki Sanada, thought that as long as he was temporary, she guessed it couldn't be helped. Yuki Sanada, shaking in her grip, thought that Junna Tenkoin was crazy strong. Yuki Sanada, wearing a small smile and raising a finger, responded by acknowledging his status as a temporary friend, saying that was simply who he was. Chikage Yamabuki, with arms crossed and eyes half closed, then said that if that was the case, she supposed she was his friend too, but only until his relationship with Milady ended, after which they would be done as well. Yuki Sanada, still smiling, turned and asked her that if he passed the exam, would she be his real friend. Junna Tenkoin, blushing and smiling while clasping her hands, said she would be really happy if the two of them were friends, since they would all become classmates at Kikote. Chikage Yamabuki, her arms folded and looking resigned, replied that she guessed she had no choice and would think about it. But she also thought to herself that it depended on whether things remained as they were. Yuki Sanada, with a bright and excited face, reminded Haruomi Tenkoin that it was now a promise and extended his fist. Haruomi Tenkoin bumped it, making a pinky pledge and confirming the deal. Meanwhile, Chikage Yamabuki watched with a cautious and slightly tense expression. As the four turned to leave, Haruomi Tenkoin told Yuki Sanada to give it everything he had, while Junna Tenkoin, face blushing slightly, said their goodbyes. As they were leaving, Yuki Sanada hurriedly called out and asked them to wait, mentioning he had one more thing he wanted to ask. Haruomi Tenkoin, his face returning to a calm and serious expression, asked what it was. Yuki Sanada, holding the skydiving consent form, explained earnestly that he wanted to go skydiving with Junna Tenkoin and politely requested his consent by signing the form. Haruomi Tenkoin, turning back with a slightly confused look, repeated the word skydiving, and Yuki Sanada, with a determined and honest face, confirmed he wanted to go with Junna Tenkoin. Yuki Sanada kept smiling, admitting that they had already decided to go bungee jumping that day, but he realized that he needed the father's consent for that as well. Blushing, he said he couldn't go with her if he didn't have permission. Hiromi Tenkoin, stunned, repeated, "Bungee jumping?" He stood silently, looking tense, while Yuki Sanada and Junna Tenkoin bowed their heads. Junna Tenkoin, with a quiet smile, said she did jump. Hiromi Tenkoin, feeling overwhelmed, thought to himself that they did a lot for friends. When Yuki Sanada tried to explain about skydiving, Hiromi Tenkoin hesitantly said, "That's great." At last he replied with a resigned expression, saying he understood. She had turned to her father with a face that radiated innocence, her eyes wide and pleading, and her hands clasped together. Using her best puppy eyes, she begged him to let her join, saying, "Can I go? Pretty please?" Her father, sweating and visibly uncomfortable, hesitated but ultimately relented, saying that since she had the necessary experience, she could go. He reminded her, though, that she would be jumping in tandem and promised to assign an instructor for her, assuring her that they would look for good professionals. Junna Tenkoin had thanked her father enthusiastically, her face beaming with joy. That, Hiromi Tenkoin explained, was the first time he had truly met Lady Junna. That was how Yuki Sanada found himself lying down, his head resting gently on Junna Tenkoin's lap. A lap pillow had been a bit more than he had expected, especially when another girl stepped up and with a chilling presence asked what exactly was going on there. Yuki Sanada thought a demon had come. Then Junna Tenkoin apologized to Chikage Yamabuki, saying it was quick. While Yuki Sanada thought he was saved, Chikage Yamabuki handed over some drinks, saying she had brought them. Junna Tenkoin apologized for having her run errands. But Chikage Yamabuki said it was quite all right. She was Milady's maid after all. However, she added, turning with a more serious look. Chikage turned to Yuki Sanada and asked what he would do if someone saw them and got the wrong idea. She said that having a lap pillow while lying on one side made them look like lovers, and then she asked if he wanted her to rat him out to her master. Junna Tenkoin said she was just giving Yuki Sanada a lap pillow as a friend. Chikage Yamabuki replied that if they were the same gender, it would be fine, but between a boy and a girl, it was a problem. She then turned to Yuki Sanada and asked, regardless of what Junna Tenkoin said, if he understood. She stared at him seriously. Yuki Sanada, sweating and with his hands up, said that to be frank, he thought nothing of it and apologized, saying it was no excuse. Chikage then faced the situation head-on, saying with determination that they would handle it. Junna responded gently, inviting Chikage to come. At first, Chikage seemed confused, wondering what she meant. Junna then said with a smile that she would also give Chikage a lap pillow. This stunned Chikage, who shouted out, "Milady!" Junna Tenkoin had said that even if someone were to see them now, they would probably think it was just friendly play. Chikage Yamabuki was shown nervously sweating and tense, while Yuki Sanada looked on. Chikage Yamabuki internally panicked, thinking that for a servant to lay her head on her mistress's lap was something she absolutely could not afford to do. Junna Tenkoin then said that if Chikage Yamabuki didn't want to do it, it meant the fact that only Yuki Sanada had that privilege made him special. Blushing, Chikage Yamabuki had muttered, "That's..." The boy joined in, smiling as he urged her to try it for Yuki Sanada's sake, while Junna Tenkoin stayed calm and encouraging. Both were pushing Chikage Yamabuki to relax and go along with it, increasing the pressure. Chikage Yamabuki, annoyed and embarrassed, gritted her teeth. She eventually relented, lying on Junna Tenkoin's lap. While resting there, she shifted the conversation. She mentioned that the results of the investigation into Yuki Sanada's friendships would come in the following week. Yuki Sanada replied that he now understood, his expression thoughtful as he seemed to accept it. Chikage then leaned close and warned him that if there was anything wrong with his relationship with Junna, it would be over for him. Junna told Chikage not to be mean, but Chikage replied with her usual carefree expression. Yuki said he didn't think there was anything worth looking into. Junna replied that she hoped he would look forward to the results. He thought to himself that he couldn't imagine making an alias just to fight the Tenkoin group. Just then someone called him. saying Yuki-kun. He turned and asked Junna what was up. Junna then shifted the conversation, mentioning with a questioning tone that Yuki's family owned a bicycle shop. She said that she wanted to try riding a bike one day. With a bright smile, Junna held up her notebook where the words, "a bicycle," were written on her own. Stunned, the panel ended with Yuki echoing her words in shock, asking if she really wanted to ride a bike. The scene shifted to a peaceful exterior shot of the school building, surrounded by trees. The atmosphere was calm and quiet. Yuki Sanada, standing next to a bicycle, said he would explain how each part of the bicycle worked. Junna Tenkoin, with excitement, replied loudly with "Thank you, sensei," while Chikage Yamabuki stood beside her. Yuki Sanada, with a blushing face, repeated "sensei," clearly surprised and overwhelmed. Junna Tenkoin and Chikage Yamabuki asked him to explain, and Yuki Sanada, still blushing, said he would. As the two girls watched him attentively, Yuki Sanada smiled confidently at them and summed up his explanation. Then he added that another thing they had to watch out for was pressing too hard on the brakes, which could cause the tires to lock up. Chikage Yamabuki explained that if the front wheel got stuck, the bike would roll, and if it was the rear wheel, it would slide sideways. Both were dangerous, so she warned them to be careful, though she thought privately that they should be fine as long as they didn't speed up. Junna Tenkoin nervously repeated the word brakes. Yuki Sanada then adjusted the saddle and told her to try hopping on. She responded with "got it." With a determined face, Chikage Yamabuki straightforwardly accepted her turn. Once it was done, Yuki Sanada handed Junna Tenkoin a helmet, saying that all that was left was practice and that it was better to learn from experience. Junna, her smiling face serious, agreed, and Yuki Sanada gently instructed her to ride while he supported her from behind. He assured her that although it might not be easy at first, she would eventually gain a sense of balance with time. With a determined smile, Junna said, "Okay, let's go." He saw her riding forward. Yuki Sanada was supporting her from behind, and Junna Tenkoin, with determination, kept going. When the bike stopped, Yuki Sanada congratulated her and Chikage Yamabuki, who was smiling. Junna Tenkoin turned to Yuki Sanada, her face flushed and anxious. She asked him if she was doing it right, still unsure if she could really handle it. Yuki Sanada responded by shouting his encouragement with both hands around his mouth, telling her she could do it and to keep going just like that. Yuki Sanada yelled out, instructing her to turn the handlebars to the right. His face was tense and worried, clearly fearing for her safety as she lost control. He was panicking internally, thinking that everything had been going so well that he had let his guard down. Yuki Sanada realized Junna Tenkoin still didn't know how to corner or brake properly. While running after her with Chikage Yamabuki, Yuki Sanada saw Junna Tenkoin sweating and screaming, asking desperately how to stop the bike. He'd been told not to let her do anything dangerous, but Chikage Yamabuki explained that Junna Tenkoin had good reflexes and was quite athletic, always quick to catch on to things. Yuki Sanada echoed the amazement, saying it was truly unexpected. Chikage Yamabuki responded that Junna Tenkoin was perfect no matter what she did, to which Yuki Sanada agreed, saying that was really cool. Chikage Yamabuki then looked at him with a hint of a smile. Yuki Sanada thought deeply that Junna Tenkoin really knew how to move and mused what an incredible girl she was. Suddenly, Junna Tenkoin shouted in alarm, asking if the bike was supposed to turn. The tension escalated as Chikage Yamabuki, teary-eyed and gripping the handlebars, said she had hit the brakes. Yuki Sanada shouted that the tires wouldn't lock up at that speed and urged her to trust him. Chikage Yamabuki, faced with the oncoming curve, clenched her teeth and followed his instructions. Eventually, she brought the bike to a stop and stunned whispered that it had stopped. Yuki Sanada then helped Junna Tenkoin off the bike gently, telling her to step out, and she complied. He reflected, thinking about how he hadn't expected Junna Tenkoin to be confused about the brakes at first, but her quick reflexes had really come in clutch when it mattered most. Even so, Yuki Sanada thought Junna Tenkoin had managed to get things under control perfectly on her first ride. He smiled at her and congratulated her, saying that she had done great, calling her milady. Yuki Sanada, blushing and flustered, realized just how close he was to the girl, his mind shouting that it was too close for comfort. Chikage Yamabuki, with a deadpan look, told them that they had been close for more than 3 seconds, while someone wondered what the hell was with that 3-second rule. Later, Yuki Sanada said that he guessed he could park the bicycle there. Yuki Sanada, standing next to Junna Tenkoin and Chikage Yamabuki, thought that perhaps it was because he was the son of a bike shop owner. The moment Junna Tenkoin grasped the basics, things had progressed smoothly. Chikage Yamabuki told Junna Tenkoin that she was incredible, and Junna Tenkoin replied modestly that it was thanks to Yuki Sanada's teaching. With the air suddenly turning serious, Chikage Yamabuki held up some papers and informed them that the results of Junna Tenkoin's relationship investigation had just come in. She asked them to listen to it while taking their break. The two listened closely to the preliminary report. Yuki Sanada's face turned tense as Chikage Yamabuki said the background had appeared clean at first, but it looked like Junna Tenkoin's mother had never been married. She repeated the question about who Junna Tenkoin's father was. Yuki Sanada then began to talk about his own family background. He said that he had learned recently that his mother had never really married. She had him out of wedlock, and he guessed that was technically illegal. He explained that his father had died shortly after his birth and admitted that the news had freaked him out when he heard it. When Chikage Yamabuki asked who his father was, Yuki replied that he didn't know. His mother never talked about her past, he said, and maybe she didn't want to because it was embarrassing to have a child out of wedlock. Chikage Yamabuki prodded further, and Yuki Sanada remarked with a blank expression that he had never even asked. He then remembered something his mother told him, instructing him to listen well. Yuki's mother had gently placed her hands on his shoulders, reassuring him that she would raise him well. She urged him not to worry about the past, but to look to the future and live his life. Back in the present, Junna Tenkoin had asked Chikage Yamabuki if she wouldn't bar Yuki Sanada. Chikage Yamabuki had replied that she couldn't just ignore it. But for now, she said with her eyes closed, there was no issue and the matter was clear. Chikage Yamabuki then remarked that Yuki Sanada and Milady still had a long way to go in their relationship. Chikage asked Yuki to keep that in mind for when the time came, adding that she would ask further questions in the future. Yuki replied that he understood. Chikage apologized for making Yuki uncomfortable and said it was necessary for him to focus on his relationship with Milady. Yuki told her there was no need to worry about it. Chikage Yamabuki, her face shown in close-up with Yuki Sanada listening intently behind her, admitted that she did not even remember what her parents looked like. She explained that her mother had given birth to her out of wedlock with an unknown man, confessing that she too was an illegitimate child. This revelation stunned Junna Tenkoin, who immediately reacted with a shocked, "Eh?" Chikage Yamabuki, shown with her eyes closed against a serious backdrop, continued her story. She said her mother had passed away when she was only a year old, and her grandfather had erased everything related to her mother, to the point that Chikage Yamabuki could not even recall her face. She had been raised by her grandfather and uncle, knowing nothing of her mother's side. That, she said, was why she could relate to Yuki Sanada's situation. Chikage Yamabuki responded in a flustered panic, her voice rising as she pointed at Yuki Sanada, claiming that it was only because Junna Tenkoin had been giving her that intense look the entire time. Junna Tenkoin calmly commented that for her to speak in such a way was unusual. Yuki Sanada thought that it had been to help the situation. Silently, Yuki Sanada acknowledged to himself that Chikage Yamabuki had helped clear the air for his sake. With her back turned, Chikage Yamabuki asked if with that they were even. Yuki Sanada grinned brightly, replying that they were, after all, friends. Junna Tenkoin mentioned casually that Chikage Yamabuki actually had no friends even at school, and asked Yuki Sanada to be her friend, prompting Yuki Sanada to reply with, "Oh, legit?" Chikage Yamabuki screamed, begging Junna Tenkoin not to say such things and repeating her pleas. Yuki Sanada asked again if it was true, and Chikage Yamabuki insisted, with widened eyes, that he should not get the wrong idea, saying she could never be his friend. Yuki Sanada thought to himself that he had believed she was scary, but was quietly impressed. Yuki Sanada, still thinking about the encounter, reflected on how stunning Chikage Yamabuki had looked in her maid outfit. He blushed at the memory and thought to himself how adorable she had seemed. He admitted this out loud with a flustered face, catching Chikage Yamabuki off guard. She quickly realized what he had meant. Yuki Sanada then brightly declared he would now call her Chikage, since they were friends. Chikage Yamabuki, in disbelief and frustration, asked who had allowed him to use her first name. The scene shifted to Junna Tenkoin mentioning she hadn't yet said hello to Yuki Sanada's mother. Yuki Sanada responded with a surprised A. Yuki Sanada, flustered and trying to dodge the topic, argued that they didn't even know whether he would pass or fail the exam and insisted there would always be next time. Junna Tenkoin, however, declared firmly that she wanted to meet his mother. Chikage Yamabuki then asked if he planned on failing, and a panicked Yuki Sanada shouted that of course he didn't. Junna Tenkoin explained that in order to deepen her friendship with Yuki Sanada, she felt she would be remiss if she didn't meet his mother properly. Yuki Sanada turned away, and Junna Tenkoin, with a thoughtful tone, asked if Yuki's mother wouldn't be worried about her own son's relationships. She added that she would have to ask Yuki's mother personally. Yuki Sanada remembered that when he was going out as a kid, Yuki's mother used to ask him where he was going, and he would reply that he was going to study with a friend. He acknowledged that it was true Yuki's mother used to interrogate him whenever he went out back then. He concluded that if it were put that way, he guessed he could refuse. But Junna Tenkoin said she planned on seeing Yuki Sanada a lot more often from then on. Junna Tenkoin then opened her notebook and with an optimistic and determined face said she wanted to apply what she had written inside it and wished to meet Yuki Sanada's mother. Yuki Sanada immediately remembered his promise to her father that their relationship must be kept a secret. Junna Tenkoin, with a thoughtful face, asked if his mother did not gossip much. Yuki Sanada then reassured them, saying his mom might look scary like a delinquent, but she hated dishonesty and never gossiped, so there was no need to worry. Chikage Yamabuki replied, yeah, while Junna Tenkoin added, well then, Yuki Sanada thought he should properly tell his mom, I've made friends with this kind of person and we're hanging out together, believing that would be best. With a bright smile, Junna Tenkoin said, yes, please take care of me. Yuki Sanada, speaking on the phone, told Yuki's mother he was a little busy and asked her to give him a moment. Yuki's mother responded with a simple, yeah. Soon after, Junna Tenkoin and Chikage Yamabuki arrived, and Junna Tenkoin greeted Yuki Sanada with a good morning. Yuki Sanada, apologizing for the delay, explained they were just tinkering with a bike, and asked them to sit back and wait a bit. Chikage Yamabuki then asked where Yuki Sanada's mother was. Yuki Sanada checked the laundry room and confirmed that everything was perfect. Then he went to make tea and noted that the tea was ready. After finishing his chores, Yuki Sanada was looking at his phone and noted that his mother was at work. Then remembering that the Sanada family's home was connected to the bicycle shop, Yuki Sanada saw a message from Junna. He thought that it was probably time, then told himself there was no need to be nervous and sat indoors looking tense. Right after that, the doorbell rang. He thought that the day for the greeting had come. Right after their conversation, the day had been decided immediately. Yuki Sanada, opening a door, told Yuki's mother that someone had come. Yuki's mother asked who it was. He answered that it was a friend of his who wanted to meet her. Yuki's mother, looking uncertain, questioned why a friend had to go out of their way to meet her, while a chibi Yuki Sanada appeared smiling and awkward, saying he had started hanging out with them recently. Yuki Sanada explained that he didn't want Yuki's mother to worry about the crowd he was in. Yuki's mother, still as a chibi, replied that it was Yuki Sanada who made friends, not her, so she saw no need to worry. Eventually, Yuki Sanada, with a tense face, said, very well, I'll go out and say hi. The girl introduced herself brightly as Junna Tenkoin and explained she came to say hello. Yuki's mother repeated the name, thinking it over, and Yuki asked if she could possibly be a member of the Tenkoin family. A voice said, pardon me, as someone stepped in. Suddenly there was a loud noise, and his mother turned with a shocked expression, her face showing clear confusion. Yuki Sanada was equally stunned, thinking questioningly when two girls entered the room. Chikage Yamabuki was behind Junna Tenkoin and a familiar girl with light hair, remembering her. Chikage hugged her and apologized for interrupting, but said she needed to talk to Yuki Sanada. The group sat together in the home, everyone feeling tense after the incident. Junna Tenkoin bowed her head and apologized, saying she didn't mean to cause any trouble. Yuki's mother was still finding it hard to grasp the situation, thinking to herself what a mess it was, and wondered aloud if it was really true that the girl before her was the daughter of the Tenkoin family. With a background of cute chickens and eggs, she repeated that to confirm. She said she saw now and understood. Yuki's mother asked what all this was about while grabbing Yuki Sanada's face. Yuki Sanada answered with a scared face that she would make sure to tell her all about it. Yuki's mother then turned to Yuki Sanada and said she wanted to hear her side of the story as well. Junna Tenkoin calmly suggested that they move upstairs for now, with Chikage Yamabuki standing beside her. Yuki's mother sat formally on the floor of a traditional room, apologizing to her guests for the small space. Junna Tenkoin replied with a delighted expression and sparkling eyes that the room had a lovely vibe to it, seemingly impressed by its atmosphere. Yuki Sanada and Chikage Yamabuki were also present. Chikage Yamabuki whispered that the room was indeed very old, but she felt it might be refreshing for milady. Yuki Sanada accepted this, saying it was fine with him, still smiling and calm. Yuki's mother then asked for the rundown. Yuki Sanada asked if she would promise not to get angry, but she simply said nah. Yuki's mother pressed him further, demanding to know how he had gotten into this whole mess. Yuki Sanada, rubbing his face, unsure where to start, began to speak, saying, "You see?" Yuki's mother listened quietly and said she was starting to get a sense of the whole story. As she served tea, she addressed Yuki directly, saying that she had been very happy when Yuki told her he wanted to get into Kikote, which she considered a pretty big dream. She thought someone needed to be in a prestigious school for that to happen. Yuki's mother said she had truly been looking forward to hearing about his dreams one day. Yuki Sanada was shown again, this time closer. He looked emotional and possibly under pressure. Yuki's mother then added, with a soft face, that it seemed she had gotten the wrong idea. Yuki's mother, seen from behind, said you most likely needed to have a long-term relationship for that to make sense. With a stern face to match her unwavering resolve, Yuki's mother said she was against the idea. Her expression was one of determination and decisiveness, leaving Yuki Sanada and Junna Tenkoin stunned and looking both shocked and hurt. The mood turned heavy and tense as she repeated that she could not allow them to date.